It's September 4th, 1953. My parents are sailing on a luxury liner, the United States liner, to Africa. I have no idea that you can't sail directly to Africa because I'm 5 years old. And I don't even know what geography is. Africa, and pardon me if I'm politically incorrect, I only know that that Africa is where how they freed the slaves. I don't know anything. Africa is deep and dark, and I am so glad I am not going with my parents. They're going because my father has some kind of prestigious position in a trade union. He's working his way up, or he's already worked his way up, because when you're at that age, what do you know? He's going to Africa. He's been sent to from something called the Sullivan Commission. They are investigating labor and apartheid in Africa and labor in other countries, wages and all kinds of things. The party is fabulous. The Bon Voyage party is fabulous. I still remember skittering across the deck in my Mary Janes and my mother wearing an orchid that was the size of a football, but it really was 2 orchids, in a taffeta dress with a cinch belt and a little hat and a net, and my father nattily dressed, and the champagne flowing in the stateroom that was as big as the living room in our New York pre-war apartment house. I know there were a lot of, I want to say famous people, but politicos there. I've seen pictures of my father standing, I think, with one of the Rockefellers. My sister and I were happy they were going away because they were not a happy couple to be around. And at first I thought we were going to have a great babysitter for 3 months, my Aunt Frances, who let us have everything we wanted. Except she had arthritis and she couldn't teach me how to ride on my training wheel bike. And, you know, I was kind of rambunctious and my sister was kind of sullen. And Aunt Frances let us do things my mother wouldn't let us do. My mother was kind of a neat freak. And she had all the towels in the closet, pink, green, and ribbons. And if you were 5, going on 6 years old, and you needed a towel and you couldn't reach it and you took the wrong one out, wow, did you get in trouble. You broke the math order, whatever it was. So Aunt Frances wasn't going to babysit. My mother said we were going to get a governess. My father said, don't be so highfalutin, it'll be a nanny. A governess. She would wear a white uniform, like a nurse, have a nurse's hat, be very nurturing, and a little medal right over here, and a cape. And she'd say, come along, dears, come along. It's before Mary Poppins. The nanny brought up a whole other image for me. A mammy. I thought this fabulous black woman would come and hold me in her arms and sing songs to me, like Aunt Jemima, because that wasn't our household. My father never came home for dinner. In his union leader role, he got drunk every night with his buddies. And he didn't come home so often that when my mother had the kitchen outfitted to eat, she only put 3 chairs. So he had a little bit of a message, and this was their relationship. Anchors Away, I'd sing it, except that I'm a little hoarse. The United States liner is leaving from Pier 86. Fabulous ship. I remember the size of it. And the band is playing Anchors Away, and my mother is waving a red kerchief, and strangely my father seemed to be crying. And we are going off as the gangplank goes up with Mrs. Slattery, the Irish, lovely, soft woman who is going to stay with us. Now, she came to stay with us in the summer. My parents were not irresponsible. Might have been nuts, but they weren't irresponsible. And they brought her to our summer house in the Berkshires, because we had 4 bedrooms there. We didn't have that in a New York apartment, so she could stay with us for 1 month in the summer, and my parents could watch her interact. And she arrived in Great Barrington, soft hair. My mother was always coiffed. Soft little flowered dress, a wonderful Irish brogue, which I thought was so romantic and unusual for me, and a book for me, The Little Engine That Could, and a book for my sister. I think it might have been Cherry Ames' Nurse. She was an older sister. And every night in the Berkshires, after our baths, for which my mother went to her bed, and Mrs. Slattery bathed us and came out in a beautiful soft blue robe, we would get in the double wing chairs, and she'd put her arm around me and her arm around my sister, and with her brogue, she'd read some very nice stories. Boy, did we want my parents to leave fast as they could, because Mrs. Slattery couldn't even keep the towels neat enough. September 4th, 1953. I can only tell you a couple of things about that day. I was aware we were non-practicing Jews, of which many had converted to anything they could convert to. But I remember my mother saying to Mrs. Slattery, "It's a Jewish holiday." It was also, I think, Labor Day. "The only thing I don't want you to do with the girls is take them to eat pork today." My father gave Mrs. Slattery an envelope, and he said, "This is the cash for the household. Use it however you want to use it. If you're frugal, you may have some left, and you can keep it." So, gangplank up, bye. Mrs. Slattery says, "Okay, girls," and her voice, I can't even get the brogue, because my sister and I used to laugh about this. We're going now." And she had promised me that I might be able to have a parakeet. And I wanted a pet, but she had a parakeet at home. She said we were going to get a cab and go up to her apartment, but I was not to frighten the parakeet. First, however, she says we're going to St. Patrick's Cathedral. I've never been in a cathedral, and I'm not walking fast enough for her, and she's pushing me. "Let's go, we have to get before this mass is over." My sister and I, we're little girls, we're tittering, I guess that's the word, we're tittering. And I get it upside to my head that I'm being very disrespectful. Off we go to St. Patrick's Cathedral, where we are taught how to kneel and put little doilies on our heads. I have some sense that this is not what Jews do. I've never been in a synagogue, but I have some sense. And I'm named after my grandfather, who renounced Judaism in 1907 to eat pork, he said, but whatever. So we then go to a Chinese restaurant where she orders lobster Cantonese, if anyone remembers that. And we think, my sister and I think, oh, she's rich. She's got my father's wads of cash. And I go to pour the rice, take the rice with a spoon, upside of the head again. We don't put implements in the rice. We shake it out. So, of course, I shake it out, and the whole thing shakes out like the bowl of rice. And upside of the head. Not horrible. I mean, we're just talking about a little readier. We finish. We take a cab to her apartment in the Bronx, so we go in so we could look at Peppy. And I walk in. Now, I already have figured out that I hate this woman. I don't want her parakeet. I don't want anything that belongs to her. And I don't know anything about ship-to-shore calls. But I think somehow I have to get to Africa. I jump in front of Peppy hard. And Peppy goes crazy. And Mrs. Slattery says, "You're not getting a parakeet." Fine. My sister and I start tittering. We go back home, and over the next few weeks, every night, we had chicken a la king with no chicken in it. It was just cream sauce with potatoes and peas. Cheap. Pork chops. Cheap. She's going to watch TV every night. We can't watch our shows. She has to watch Victory at Sea because her son was in the Navy. And this is like a heavy show for kids. I'm not even 6 years old, and I'm listening to swelling music. It wasn't even John Adams. And we watched that, and then she has another show she has to watch, Medic. I don't know if anyone remembers Medic, but it was a show about having terrible diseases and figuring out what they were. And at the end of the show, it always said, and please watch out for the 7 warning signs of cancer. And they had a caduceus. And by the time my parents were ready to come home, with other stuff in between, I had every one of those signs. I couldn't swallow. I couldn't fall asleep. I had a lump here. My sister was traumatized beyond belief. On my birthday, November 11th, my parents called ship to shore from the Rhodesian castle. I have a little sailor's doll that said he was Barbie's husband later on, but he had to grow into it. And he wasn't even the same species because he was stuffed. But it said Rhodesian castle. And my parents called, and Mrs. Slattery said, do not tell your mother that you have gained 11 pounds. Now I'm this big. And I had always been puny, but now I'm feeling like, whoa. And so my power you, where we make this, and I just want to say, please come home, please come home. I don't care how. I didn't even know the word flawed. I don't care. I just want you. But we tell my parents, we're doing fabulous. And they tell us they're doing fabulous. They're going to Las Palmas. They're going here. They're going there. It's November 11th. In December, we went down to Pier 86 for them to arrive. And my mother is waving to us. My sister and I don't know she's my mother because she has gotten very fat. And my father is drunker than he's ever been. And they come down and they hug us, and we get in the car, and my father takes Mrs. Slattery home, and he gets back in the car and he says he feels very good. He gave her all the money that she saved. Now, my sister and I don't report anything then. And then my mother starts to report that on their way back on the United States liner, they had been staying in the stateroom next to the senator from Massachusetts, John F. Kennedy. And he and his wife were always fighting. And my father and JFK were always at the bar. So when JFK would get in, plates would hurl. My mother was just seasick the whole time. Every diary entry says, still seasick. I don't know what good came out of that trip. But my sister and I were happy to see my parents, and we were thrilled to tell my parents that my father was a jerk and he gave all the money away to this rogue. In October 1963, 10 years later, my father received a phone call from John F. Kennedy telling him, and they'd made friends on the boat, that he was on the short list to be vetted to be Secretary of Labor, and that if he stopped his public drinking, he would be. And my father, I was in college. My father, young, but my father called me, and he was so excited. I said, Daddy, do you think you could do that? And he said, I have to. In November 1963, John F. Kennedy was killed. In February 1964, my father died on a dignitary's trip to Tiberias. But the memory of that trip is all about those connections, and that you cannot sail to Africa. Thank you.